Breaking news: Keir Starmer's political career may not survive the night. Just minutes ago, Labour MPs officially triggered a vote of no confidence in their own leader. This is not a rumour, not speculation, this is happening right now inside Westminster. The man who spent the last 4 years rebuilding Labour's image, who many thought was on his way to number 10, is now fighting for his political life. The question tonight is simple. Will Starmer still be Labour leader by tomorrow morning, or is this the end of the road? To understand how we got to this extraordinary moment, you need to know just how fast Starmer's world has collapsed. 3 weeks ago, he was riding high in the polls. Labour had a steady lead over the Conservatives, inflation was falling, and political commentators were quietly predicting a Labour landslide at the next general election. Starmer was seen as a calm, competent alternative to years of Conservative chaos. But inside the party, the mood was far from calm. Pressure had been building for months over one issue: Brexit. The trouble started when a leaked internal document revealed that Starmer's team had been in secret talks about deepening economic ties with the European Union. The document, 47 pages long, wasn't just a set of vague proposals. It laid out specific plans, extending fishing rights for EU fleets until 2035, aligning Britain's food standards with EU regulations, even allowing the European Court of Justice to settle some trade disputes. Technically, none of this meant rejoining the EU, but to many Brexit voters, it felt like death by 1,000 cuts. Labour MPs representing the so-called Red Wall, the working class, Brexit-supporting constituencies in Northern England were furious. These were the same MPs who had spent years trying to rebuild trust after Labour's 2019 collapse. They knew how fragile that trust was. One MP for a former Conservative seat said privately that Starmer had just handed our constituencies back to Nigel Farage on a silver platter. That WhatsApp message was quickly leaked to journalists and spread like wildfire. It didn't take long for this anger to spill into the open. In Sunderland, where Brexit won by 61%, the local Labour chair resigned in protest, accusing Starmer of betraying the democratic decision of ordinary working people. In Hartlepool, members held an emergency meeting where 3/4 of attendees demanded that Starmer explain himself or step aside. In Grimsby, furious party members confronted their MP outside a town hall meeting, shouting that Labour had promised never to drag Britain back toward Brussels. The video went viral within hours, fueling even more backlash online. At the same time, Reform UK Nigel Farage's party saw an opportunity and pounced. Farage called an emergency press conference where he branded Starmer a Brexit traitor and announced what he called Operation Red Wall, a plan to stand Reform candidates in every Labour seat where more than 55% of voters supported Brexit. The message was simple: Reform would be the party of Brexit. Labour had sold out. Within days, polling showed Reform UK jumping 3 points nationally. But in Brexit-heavy constituencies, they surged by nearly 10 points. The panic inside Labour was immediate. Shadow cabinet members started giving carefully worded interviews, insisting Labour had no plans to reverse Brexit. Deputy Leader Angela Rayner stressed that Labour respects the referendum result, a line widely interpreted as a subtle rebuke of Starmer's direction. But the damage was done. Perception matters more than reality in politics, and the perception now was that Labour under Starmer was quietly trying to undo Brexit. Behind the scenes, MPs began meeting in secret. At first, they insisted it wasn't a plot, just discussions about the party's future. But as private polling came in showing Labour collapsing in key swing seats, the mood shifted. Union leaders began calling Starmer personally, warning him that they could not support policies that risked alienating working-class voters. The GMB union released a statement saying they were deeply concerned about Labour's direction. Unite was even blunter, publicly warning that Labour must never betray the referendum result. All of this built to a dramatic moment late last night, when a group of 27 Labour MPs, many of them from northern seats, signed a formal motion of no confidence in Keir Starmer's leadership. This was no ordinary rebellion. These weren't fringe backbenchers or habitual troublemakers. These were serious MPs, some of them former ministers, some with strong union backing. Their calculation was brutal but simple. Better to take Starmer down now than let him lead Labour into an election disaster later. And so here we are tonight with Starmer facing the fight of his life. The vote is happening behind closed doors, in Committee Room 14 of the House of Commons. The same room where previous leaders have faced their own moments of truth. The atmosphere is tense, almost funeral-like. MPs are filing in one by one, some looking grim, some looking relieved. Starmer himself is reportedly calm but pale, knowing that everything he has worked for could end within the next few hours. The clock struck 7 and the vote began. Committee Room 14, usually just another wood-panelled chamber in Westminster, had turned into a political courtroom. The atmosphere was thick, almost suffocating. Reporters crowded the corridors, staffers whispered nervously, and phones were buzzing non-stop as MPs were lobbied right up until the last minute. This wasn't just about one man's future, this was about the direction of the entire Labour Party. Starmer sat at the head of the table, flanked by his closest allies, his face unreadable but his body language betraying the tension. The usually confident barrister who once dismantled Conservative ministers at the dispatch box now looked like a man calculating whether he'd still be leader by the end of the night. Around him, MPs shuffled in quietly, some nodding politely, others refusing to make eye contact. These were colleagues he had campaigned for, fundraised for, defended in the media, and tonight many of them were about to vote on whether to end his leadership. The process was simple but brutal. MPs lined up one by one, were handed a ballot paper and marked either confidence or no confidence. There was no speech-making, no grandstanding. Just the sound of pens scratching against paper and envelopes being dropped into a wooden ballot box. The room was silent, except for the occasional cough or the faint creak of chairs. Outside, the media was already speculating about what would happen if Starmer lost, who might run to replace him, whether Labour could survive another leadership contest this close to an election. Some MPs hesitated with their ballot papers, clearly torn. Loyalty to a leader is powerful, but so is fear of losing your seat. For many, this wasn't personal, it was pure political survival. They had seen the private polling. They knew Reform UK's surge was real, that the Conservatives were already testing attack lines about Labour selling out Brexit. They had just one question in their minds. If they went back to their voters with Keir Starmer as leader, would those voters punish them at the ballot box? When the final vote was cast, the ballot box was sealed and taken out for counting. The room didn't relax, if anything. The tension grew worse. This was the longest half hour of Starmer's career. MPs huddled in corners, whispering, some texting allies outside. Rumours started flying that the numbers were very close, that Starmer might scrape through by just a handful of votes. One MP was overheard saying, "If he survives tonight, he's wounded, not safe." And then the result came in. The chair of the Parliamentary Labour Party stood, cleared his throat, and read the numbers aloud. Votes cast, 254. Votes of confidence, 127. Votes of no confidence, 124. Abstentions, 3. The room erupted in murmurs. Starmer had survived, but only by 3 votes. 3. Out of more than 250. On paper, that meant Starmer remained Labour leader. In reality, it was a political disaster. Winning by such a narrow margin is not a show of strength. It's a sign that half your party wants you gone, and the other half is just barely willing to keep you. Starmer's face barely moved as the result was read out, but those close to him said later that the relief was mixed with grim realisation. He had kept his job, but only just. The MPs who had backed him looked shaken, not triumphant. They knew what this meant. Starmer's authority had been shattered. The rebels, meanwhile, wasted no time. Within minutes of the result, Labour WhatsApp groups lit up with messages calling Starmer a lame duck leader. Some MPs who had voted confidence privately told journalists they still had serious doubts about his leadership, but were unwilling to plunge the party into chaos this close to an election. Outside the room, the press pack descended. Starmer made a brief statement to cameras, insisting that Labour was united and focused on winning the next general election. But even as he spoke, journalists were already reporting on who might replace him if the pressure forced him out later. Names like Angela Rayner, Wes Streeting, and Rachel Reeves were being floated by party insiders. The narrative had shifted in real time, from will Starmer survive to how long can he last. Meanwhile, the reaction from outside Westminster was immediate and ferocious. Reform UK held an impromptu rally in Birmingham, where Nigel Farage declared Starmer a dead man walking, and promised to finish the job of taking Labour down in the Red Wall. Conservative MPs, delighted by the chaos, took to social media mocking Labour's divisions. One Tory minister tweeted, "If Labour can't even unite behind their own leader, how can they run the country?" The message was clear. The next election had just become winnable again for the Conservatives. But the real danger for Starmer wasn't from his opponents, it was from his own side. In politics, survival is about momentum. And tonight, Starmer had lost it. Winning by 3 votes didn't just keep him in office, it painted a target on his back. Every decision he makes from now on will be second-guessed. Every policy announcement will be scrutinised for signs of weakness. His critics know he's vulnerable. His allies know it too. And as the night wore on, the backlash spread beyond Westminster. Local constituency parties began issuing statements demanding that Starmer clarify Labour's position on Brexit. One northern Chilean peso went further, openly calling for his resignation despite the result of the vote. On social media, hashtags like #StarmerOut and #LabourCrisis were trending within minutes. By midnight, political betting markets had slashed the odds on Starmer stepping down before the next election. This wasn't just a narrow escape, it was the beginning of open season on Keir Starmer's leadership. The morning after the vote, Westminster woke up to headlines that could only be described as devastating for Keir Starmer. Every major newspaper splashed the same message across its front page. Starmer survives barely. The sub-headlines were even worse. Leader wounded, party split. Career on life support. Political journalists, who just weeks ago were writing about Labour's smooth march toward power, were now openly speculating about when, not if, Starmer would step down. The tone had shifted overnight. Inside Labour HQ, panic set in almost immediately. Private polling commissioned just hours before the vote showed that Labour's lead over the Conservatives had fallen from 8 points to just 3 within the margin of error. Worse still, in the key Brexit-supporting constituencies that Labour had to win to form a majority, support had collapsed. One internal memo warned that Reform UK could now overtake Labour in some red wall seats if the trend continued. That memo leaked to the press before noon, further fueling the sense of crisis. By lunchtime, the first resignations began. 2 constituency party chairs stepped down, citing Starmer's failure to rebuild trust with working-class voters. A junior shadow minister, usually the most loyal group of MPs, resigned live on BBC Radio, saying she could not support a leader who refuses to listen to the concerns of our heartlands. Her resignation letter spread like wildfire on social media, sparking calls for others to follow suit. Then came the unions. Unite's General Secretary issued a statement calling for an urgent meeting with the Labour leadership to reset the party's direction. Behind closed doors, union leaders were said to be furious. They had backed Starmer during his leadership bid, precisely because he promised to respect the referendum result and focus on bread and butter issues like jobs and wages. Now they felt betrayed, and they were letting him know it. GMB, another major union, warned that their financial support for Labour could be reviewed if the party failed to reconnect with its base. Meanwhile, Reform UK was having the best week of its political life. Nigel Farage appeared on every major news channel, hammering the message that Labour had shown its true colours and that Brexit was once again under threat. In one fiery interview, he said, "Keir Starmer might have survived last night, but the British people will finish him off at the next election." The line was repeated on every evening bulletin. Within hours, a Snap YouGov poll showed Reform UK rising to 18% nationally, its highest level ever, with support spiking even higher in northern constituencies. Conservative strategists smelled blood. Downing Street sources told the media that the government was considering tabling a parliamentary motion demanding a general election, gambling that Labour's internal chaos would scare voters away from the opposition. Tory MPs took to social media posting memes mocking Labour's split, some even using the #sign, #deadmanwalking. For a party that had spent months tearing itself apart over leadership challenges and economic turmoil, this was a gift, and they were enjoying every second of it. Back in Westminster, Starmer's allies tried to project calm. Wes Streeting, one of his most loyal defenders, went on Sky News insisting that the Labour Party is united and focused on beating the Tories. But even as he spoke, journalists were reporting that several more MPs were preparing to submit letters calling for Starmer's resignation. The sense of inevitability was growing, like a snowball gathering speed downhill. Perhaps the most damaging blow came from Angela Rayner, Starmer's own deputy. In an interview with ITV, she said that the party had to seriously reflect on the message voters were sending and make sure we are on the right side of working people. She stopped short of criticising Starmer directly, but her words were widely interpreted as a sign that she was positioning herself as a possible successor. Political betting markets immediately shortened the odds on Rayner becoming Labour's next leader. The media narrative was now locked in. Starmer had survived the vote but lost the party. Columnists compared him to Theresa May, who survived her own no-confidence vote in 2018, only to be forced out months later. Commentators noted that Labour's MPs had not rallied around him after the vote. In fact, several had gone on record saying they wanted him to change course or face another challenge. For Starmer, the next 48 hours were a nightmare. Every TV camera, every microphone, every journalist wanted to know, would he resign? Would he reshuffle his shadow cabinet to reassert control? Or would he double down and dare his critics to try again? His advisers debated furiously behind closed doors. Some urged him to sack the rebels and show strength. Others warned that any purge would only deepen the party's civil war. As Friday approached, a fresh set of polls landed on Starmer's desk, and they were catastrophic. Labour's national lead had not just shrunk further, it had disappeared entirely. The latest numbers put Labour and the Conservatives neck and neck, with Reform UK at a record high. Worse still, in the battleground seats that would decide the next election, Labour was now trailing the Tories by 4 points. The dream of a majority government was slipping away, and fast. The message from voters was clear. They had seen enough drama, enough division. They wanted stability, not another party fighting with itself. If Labour didn't fix the crisis quickly, it risked handing the Conservatives another 5 years in power. And yet, instead of calming down, the rebellion was growing. MPs who had abstained in the no-confidence vote were now saying publicly that they would not support Starmer unless he completely ruled out any new Brexit negotiations. The party was fracturing in real time. As the sun set on the second day after the vote, Starmer called an emergency meeting of his shadow cabinet. According to leaks, the meeting was tense and emotional. Some ministers reportedly told him to stay and fight, while others said the party needed a fresh start. Starmer listened in silence before saying simply, "I am not going anywhere." But even those words sounded less like a promise and more like a plea. By the weekend, the crisis had reached boiling point. Westminster, usually quiet on a Saturday, was buzzing with speculation about whether Keir Starmer could cling on to power. Journalists camped outside his North London home. Camera crews tracked his every move. Even casual conversations between MPs were being leaked to the press. It was as if the entire political class could smell blood in the water, and they weren't wrong. The first big blow came on Saturday morning when 3 more constituency Labour Party chairs resigned simultaneously, releasing a joint statement accusing Starmer of breaking the last thread of trust between Labour and working-class Brexit voters. The statement went viral online, gathering tens of thousands of shares in just a few hours. "Had Starmer out" was the top trending hashtag on X, formerly Twitter, for nearly 24 hours, and hashtag Labour crisis wasn't far behind. The grassroots rebellion was no longer a whisper, it was a roar. Inside Labour HQ, staff were in damage control mode. Senior strategists begged MPs to stop going public with their criticism, warning that every fresh headline about Labour division made it harder to hold the party together. But the leaks kept coming. Private WhatsApp messages from shadow ministers were published in the Sunday Times, with one senior figure allegedly calling Starmer a liability we can't afford. The drip of damaging revelations created a sense of inevitability. If the leader's own front bench was losing faith, how could he possibly survive? Meanwhile, Reform UK was turning the crisis into a political carnival. Nigel Farage toured red wall constituencies, holding packed rallies, whipping up anger over Starmer's leaked EU plans, and framing Labour as a party run by London elites who didn't respect the Brexit vote. Videos of Farage's fiery speeches racked up millions of views on TikTok and Facebook, particularly among younger voters who hadn't been engaged in politics since 2016. For the first time, commentators began openly discussing the possibility of Reform UK actually winning seats under Britain's first past-the-post system, something that had once seemed impossible. The Conservatives also sensed their moment. Over the weekend, Rishi Sunak gave a rare Saturday press conference in which he accused Labour of being hopelessly divided and hanky incapable of governing. Tory MPs flooded social media with attack lines, gleefully reminding voters of Labour's previous Brexit splits under Jeremy Corbyn. Their goal was clear: keep the focus on Labour's chaos and rebuild their own credibility in the process. By Sunday night, the polling picture had gone from bad to catastrophic. A new Survation poll put Labour and the Conservatives dead, even nationally, with Reform UK at a staggering 19%, its highest ever. In some key northern marginals, Reform had overtaken Labour entirely. For many Labour MPs, this was the nightmare scenario: a 3-way vote split that could hand dozens of seats back to the Conservatives, or even deliver Reform its first real parliamentary breakthrough. Starmer's team scrambled to respond. Plans were hastily drawn up for a major speech on Monday in which Starmer would attempt to reset the narrative and promise that a Labour government would respect the Brexit deal in full. Draft copies of the speech were leaked to the press before he even delivered it, leading some commentators to question whether he had lost control of his own operation. The optics were terrible: a leader fighting to survive but unable to keep even his closest advisers from leaking against him. Even more damaging were the whispers about succession. Over the weekend, Angela Rayner reportedly held private talks with key union figures about what her leadership might look like if Starmer stepped aside. Rachel Reeves's allies began quietly sounding out MPs to see if they would back her in a leadership contest. Wes Streeting, the ambitious Shadow Health Secretary, was said to be taking soundings from colleagues. In politics, once the conversation shifts to who comes next, the current leader is already in trouble. The media fed the frenzy. Sunday political shows opened with panel discussions about the endgame for Starmer, some openly predicting he would be forced out within months. Columnists drew comparisons to Theresa May and Gordon Brown, leaders who clung on through sheer willpower only to be brought down later. Betting markets now had Starmer as odds-on favourite to be replaced before the next election. The sense of inevitability was thick in the air. Through it all, Starmer tried to project calm. He was photographed leaving his home with a forced smile, telling reporters that he was getting on with the job, but those who saw him in private said he looked exhausted, even defeated.